We are now about 4.5 months after the release of Monster Hunter Wilds, and the discussion surrounding the game has been all over the place, sometimes getting a bit vitriolic. But if there is one topic that has the most contention, it's the topic of difficulty. Monster Hunter Wilds is too easy. There's no challenge. Monster Hunter has lost its identity. These statements have merit, some much more than others, but I think that a lot of the conversation lacks the proper context and nuance as to why people are feeling like this. In this video, I want to take some time to discuss what I believe is lost in the discussion surrounding challenge in the latest Monster Hunter title, but also how the future looks bright. So let's talk about the true issue with difficulty in Monster Hunter Wilds. What a good intro, huh? So, friction. Friction in video games is a key component when thinking of the design and function of the medium, and without it, titles would feel like power fantasies of their respective genres. First, how do we define friction in gaming? Well, while there's no single clear definition, anything that gives some pushback to the player with either mechanics or in-game obstacles is essentially considered friction. The level of difficulty, stamina bars, tough player choices in narrative games, or limiting healing items in your title are all general examples of friction. Sometimes developers can get very creative with how they implement friction in their titles. Take the example that is the checkpoint system found in the Souls series and other games like Stellar Blade. In these titles, zones are divided into sections full of difficult enemies that you must take down in order to make progress. Checkpoints then are naturally designed into the levels, and the player can choose to heal any lost HP when you rest at them, but at a cost. When you do decide to rest, all the enemies you just took down are respawned. Sometimes these rest spots are tucked away in the corner of a non-linear area, and this design choice causes friction to the player, creating a choice. Do I heal up and take the same enemies down once more, maybe more efficiently? Or do I push through as I stand in hopes of finding the next resting spot? Friction comes in many ways, and the amount of friction can vary from title to title. On one end of the spectrum, you have a game like A Short Hike that presents the player with very little friction. It's a game created solely to provide an experience that is free from challenge, but it fills the rest of the game up with great writing and some incredible vibes. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the two titles in the Dragon's Dogma series, which take the idea of friction and apply it to almost every component of the game design. You want to fast travel in a large open world? Well, you can either choose to use a limited in-game item or choose a carriage, which can, and most likely will, be attacked while you're on the way to your destination, leaving you stranded in the middle of nowhere at night. These two different options show that Dragon's Dogma uses friction to provide a challenge, but also carve an identity, as there is no other open world game with systems quite like this. And remember this point, it's going to be important later. I hope that, with the examples I've provided, it's easier to understand the main point of this video. The real issue with Monster Hunter Wilds is that lack of friction established in the series. So, for me to properly go over the topic of friction and the history of Monster Hunter, I had to do some research, which was pretty time consuming. Instead of doing that, maybe you should use your time more wisely and consider learning from professionals at today's sponsor, Southern New Hampshire University's Game Development Program. Are you stuck in a job that isn't bringing you joy? Are you unable to proceed to the next level of your career path due to a lack of experience or education? Consider pursuing a path in something you love. I'm assuming that you, wonderful viewer, love gaming and maybe have even considered getting into game development like I myself did so many moons ago. Well, now SNHU makes it easier than ever to enroll and begin your path into the industry of your dreams. SNHU is one of the largest online accredited universities in the United States and is radically affordable, their online tuition rates being some of the lowest in the nation. Your courses are taught by faculty with real-world experience, so you'll have opportunities to connect with people in the industry. And when you graduate, SNHU will still be there to help you as you begin your job hunt. You might also be eligible for financial aid or have previous college credits that could fast-track your degree at SNHU. I also personally believe in SNHU, as I have family that went on to graduate from the university. Don't believe me? Well, here's a picture of us at his graduation. You just can't see their face because they're my family, and I genuinely respect their privacy. Not only will this benefit you, but if you also would like to support the channel, check out what SNHU has to offer. So, what are you waiting for? Go to snhu.edu/thegamingresume and learn how you can get started with a game development degree today. Now, back to your regularly scheduled programming. In order to understand what I mean, we need a quick history lesson. In 2004, Capcom and the lead devs for the first Monster Hunter decided to create a game to work with the newly released network adapter for the PlayStation 2. The game would have a focus on cooperative play, taking down giant monsters. The game was tough, like a lot of Capcom games, but not in the traditional sense. I mean, the monsters did hit hard, yes, and the player had limited options overall, but what made the game truly difficult, if you will, was the layers of friction in almost every action the player took. From gathering and mining for supplies needed to either heal yourself or complete objectives, to having so little money that you could barely buy any gear from the start, to having a stamina bar for running and diving. Monster Hunter felt weird and borderline alien with its design choices. Like, for example, if the player needed to mine, you would first need to purchase a pickaxe to do so. And then on top of that, that same pickaxe would break after a few uses. If you want to heal, you select the potion from your item bar, and when you press the button to use it, your hunter stops, dead in their tracks for a few seconds, chucks the potion, and then flexes before being able to move again. Oh, and your weapons? Yeah, they lose sharpness as you use them to deal damage to the monsters, and with that loss of sharpness, you also lose attack power. Now, to sharpen, you need an item that needs to be gathered or bought at a store, and it takes like 8 seconds to fully finish the sharpening animation, all while you're not moving. It feels like every single action is met with friction. But this was by design. In combat, the encounters with the monsters play out in an almost turn-based manner. After one would do a string of attacks, there is almost always a window of opportunity for you, the hunter, to take your turn. That could be healing, choosing to attack, planting a trap on the ground. It's up to you. Friction was part of this game's DNA, dude. I mean, listen, you had to mark the monster with a paintball so it could just show up on your map, which the map itself is an item that you need to carry and takes up inventory space. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you forget to mark the monster? Well, good luck finding it. Oh, you marked it and then the paintball wore off? You better mark it again, or you can lose track of it and spend 5 to 10 minutes just looking for the thing as it moves around the area. Sorry. So, as you can see, the game had a strong and clear identity, and it would remain this way for a long time, really until 2018's Monster Hunter World. Before I get into some of the many changes that were made for Monster Hunter World's release, 2 things I want you to consider. 1. With every single release of Monster Hunter after arguably the second generation, Capcom has tried to lower the barrier of entry. Each new generation got progressively easier to dive into, but at least back then, it felt like a necessary cleanup or polishing of the many systems that Monster Hunter has. And then 2, I can't possibly go over every single change, but I will highlight the changes in the 5th gen of Monster Hunter that had the most impact on the identity of Monster Hunter. Because of this section won't be super comprehensive, but will rather set up my points for Wilds, which is the focus of the video anyway. With that said, let's talk about how the Monster Hunter devs began to sand down a lot of the friction in Monster Hunter with the release of World and later Rise. With World, you no longer had to stay put when using a potion. You could now walk and chug, and even jog and chug. Gathering materials and mining was done in a pinch, much faster than before. Paintballs were gone and replaced with scutflies, which would guide you to the monster's location after you would gather enough tracks or monster evidence throughout the area. There were multiple camps in each area that you could fly into from quest start or mid-quest, and you could restock all of your items when at these camps. This was probably one of, if not the biggest change to the formula, as in previous games, if you ran out of items, you would have to start gathering those necessary ingredients to restock on potions or what have you. On release, these changes had already caused contention in the fanbase, and World overall felt like one of the easiest base games in Monster Hunter history. I clearly remember taking down Anjanath back on release and thinking to myself that it felt a bit easier than I expected. And no, I'm not mentioning Anjanath because of the discourse about wilds or anything, but rather because at the time it was a new monster for the new generation, and it felt super imposing when first seeing it in that reveal trailer for World. All of these changes meant that Monster Hunter was just easier than ever to get into, but at the cost of a lot of the friction that the series had built its identity around. There were some good quality of life changes though. Eating before going on a hunt for extra buffs is crucial in Monster Hunter, and in World, if you forget to do so, you can just eat at any camp when out on a hunt. This was a welcome change, as forgetting to eat always made me feel very stupid. Still, at this time it wasn't close enough to say this wasn't feeling like Monster Hunter, but it was the beginning of a trend that would continue with the next game in the series, Monster Hunter Rise and beyond. With all of this in mind, however, I have to mention that Monster Hunter World went on to sell over 28.5 million copies worldwide, when including sales of the Iceborne Master Edition, which made it the best-selling Monster Hunter game of all time, and the single highest selling game in Capcom's history. This is super important. When the first demo of Monster Hunter Rise hit our Switch consoles, RIP, it was apparent that the newest additions of wire bugs, and specifically Wirefall, would significantly impact the design and feel of this entry. You see, in Monster Hunter, whenever you get hit by a relatively large attack, your character ends up flying and then on the ground, which leads the player to make a choice. Monster Hunter is so deep with its combat that being on the floor literally has a level of strategy involved. For you see, while you're on the ground, your hunter is invincible. So you can choose to remain there while the monster is attacking to wait out a window of opportunity, or get up immediately if you can. So what does Wirefall do then? It uses the wire bugs to pick you right up, removing the strategy entirely because as soon as you get hit in Rise, a few button presses and you're back on your feet, like nothing happened. Now, does this mean the game wasn't designed properly and was given a totally broken mechanic? No, not really. Some monsters could still predict your wirefall and unleash a second attack that would catch you in midair since you have 0 iframes the moment you choose to do a wirefall, but overall, the technique felt too powerful in base Rise. Another change was to gathering, which only required one button press to gather or mine all materials from each spot. And then, with the introduction of Palamutes, planning when to sharpen was a thing of the past. Now, if you're riding on your trusty canine, you can sharpen as you move to the next area in pursuit of the monster, and you can even heal on top of it too. These changes continue the trend of removing friction to an alarming degree. The games weren't exactly cakewalks or anything, but for seasoned hunters like myself, it was obvious that each game's first goal was to attract a larger player base with that release of each base game. Rise on Switch went on to sell 10 million copies by March of 2022 and 17.1 million copies overall as of March 2025. So, what about Wilds? When Monster Hunter Wilds released, and to this day, one of the biggest issues or points of contention, like I mentioned earlier, is the difficulty. The game isn't just easy in the traditional sense, however. It's not simply that the monsters do less damage or that they have very little HP, which both are true to an extent, but rather that everything else that Monster Hunter had designed, developed, and finally tuned for almost 15 years was sanded down from a rough edge to a smooth surface. Gone was the need to move to another area or wait for the perfect opportunity to sharpen your weapon. Just get on your Sacred, which is your mount this time, and sharpen, just like in Rise. Get hit and knocked down? No wirefall, but your Sacred can pick you up at the press of a button and move you away so you can heal while riding. Time to find the monster, but wait, you don't need to. Just let your Sacred automatically take you to the monster with no input from you besides pressing a single button to run faster. Which Rise started this particular trend of just showing you the monster at all times on your map. put a trap down and the monster left the area? Well, just pick it back up. Your trusty Palico? Stronger than ever, dude. Gathering materials can't be done from a distance while riding your Sacred. Fast travel can be done to any camp at any time, even in the middle of battle. Losing food buffs every time you cart? Nope. They're now on a universal timer, and some can last 50 real-world minutes. These kinds of design decisions for the sake of quality of life, quote-unquote, all hamper the Monster Hunter experience. You previously needed to take your time, make conscious choices, and prepare your items properly before setting out on the hunt. And when you remove almost all of this aspect, then a good portion of that original design is lost, especially when you consider just how strong your hunter is in Wilds. Every weapon now has a counterattack or a parry attack, sometimes both, that can wildly change the flow of combat in your favor. It makes sense thematically, as in this story your hunter is a veteran, but still, it's a far departure from what previous generations did, and kinda makes Monster Hunter Wilds feel more like a traditional action game over a Monster Hunter game in identity. Now, what I feel has had the most impact in this regard, however, is the wound system. I know many other creators have covered this mechanic, and I certainly don't want to rub any salt in the wound, but I can't help it. This mechanic is overtly powerful. There is simply too much benefit to using focus mode and capitalizing on the extra damage and extra parts that drop. Not only the damage, but a lot of the monsters will remain stun locked until you finish your animation, which is a decision, dude. On top of focus mode making many of the weapons position heavy gameplay almost moot, looking at Greysword, it's hard not to look at its addition as almost questionable. I mean, I don't know why I was at it. I don't know the goal of it or why it's as powerful as it is on release, but it's there. And simply not engaging with it while an option is not a good one. If a game presents me with a way to play, why should I avoid it? I never had to avoid new mechanics in previous games in the series, and I'm not about to start now. And because you get so many parts from wound breaks too, grinding the monsters, which is another enjoyable part of the experience, is reduced to a bare minimum. And don't even get me started on the investigations that guarantee a rare drop. Anyway, once again, I need to present the sales for this specific title. Wild sold over 10 million copies in its first month, which made it Capcom's fastest selling game ever. I hope you're noticing something here. As the games continued to be sanded down, the sales kept getting better and better. This is correlational, of course, but something to consider and why I think the higher-ups at Capcom may be pushing for this kind of design from the base games. Ah, man. Before we proceed, I want to make something clear. I don't like to simply present criticism without at least attempting to provide some form of feedback or potential solution. If this is the direction the Monster Hunter series is heading towards, then I gotta ask, what can the devs do to preserve the core experience that is Monster Hunter? If you're constantly sanding away a lot of the rough edges that you deem unnecessary, then what's left? Well, looking at Wilds, it's got one of the best combat systems out there. It's impeccable, damn near perfect when looked at in a vacuum. It's fun, fast, fluid, and feels incredible. So what I think Capcom should do is what I believe they're already doing, and that is buffing the hell out of the monsters. With the latest title update released at the time of this writing, Mizutsune was added to the game, and with it, an 8-star tempered version of the hunt. This particular Mizu moved fast and had a few hard-hitting moves that could maybe one-shot you. Now, moves that kill you in one hit are not my idea of adequate challenge. On the contrary, it can feel a bit artificial. However, I understand there being a place for attacks like these, especially when looking at what they did with the 8-star tempered Gormagala. With his reintroduction in Wilds, Gormagala, one of my favorites, became a monster to be genuinely afraid of. His moveset is faster than ever, and he hits hard. And this is all in the base hunt of high rank. It still suffers from low HP, which is an issue with most monsters in Wilds, but overall, the design of the fight felt like it was meant to directly counter the tools the hunter has. Gore has many moves that will directly catch you if you try to use, for example, the Sacred Pickup, and his unrelenting nature leaves little breathing room for anything else. A lot of his moves have slower or faster windups, which makes offsetting attacks a lot harder, and dude just hits like a truck with less one-shot moves, though those are still there. Tempered H-Star took this design to a whole nother level though. It gave Gorr 55,000 HP, which is around 10,000 HP less than Fatalis and Iceborne, and his moves feel like death is around the corner constantly. One wrong move and it can cost you an entire hunt. And guys, this is where I had the most fun playing this game. I kid you not, hunting Gorr with some of the community members of this channel was the most fun that I've had with Monster Hunter in years. Like, I genuinely think it may have reached a peak above anything from Rise and World, and that includes a lot of the Master Rank expansion content. I finally saw the vision. A hard-hitting monster that had heavily telegraphed one-shot attacks with a ton of health and a lot of variety. It took us more than 5 to 6 attempts to take it down as duos, which meant using the overpowered palicos, traps, and all the damage from the environment at our disposal. And most importantly, wounds hardly did any CC. Gorr would continue to move and attack a majority of the time when doing focus attacks. This was it, man. The Wild's vision. I finally saw it, and I'm happy. Elated even. With the second title update on the horizon at the time of this video's publishing, I can only hope that Lagiacrus's return is presented to the player base as H-Star Gorr was. Challenging but fair, and forcing us to use all of these overpowered tools to actually work in tandem and deliver one of the best hunts in the series. Additionally, when I think back to the last two releases in the series, both of its Master Rank expansions fixed most of the biggest issues I had with their base game releases in some way or another. This is readily apparent in Rise's Sunbreak expansion, and how the difficulty and challenge in that title was increased in its release organically. It worked with what Rise brought to the table. I hope that whenever Wild's Master Rank expansion releases, the devs will have figured out a way to provide the challenge we all want from this set of tools that they have provided. I think it's possible, and I'm willing to bet that it will happen. The structure underneath this game is just so good. The discourse around this game has been truly exhausting, and I hope that this video, if received well at all, doesn't add anything negative to the discourse, but rather provide an avenue for critical thinking, discussion, and perhaps even a different point of view. The problem with Monster Hunter Wilds isn't that it's simply too easy, but that the friction that made the series is missing. That identity that it carved out in a sea of different action titles is fading in. We need it back, one way or another. Thanks for watching. And one last thanks to SNHU for sponsoring this channel. Please check out the link in the description below. It is free of charge to do so, and it will help the channel greatly. So if you want to support me, please consider some of your time. Thank you.